Imagine a moment when grief is turned into power, when the loss of a leader does not break a movement but gives it new life. Today we stand before a story that is more than politics, more than war. It is about dignity, resilience, and the will of a people who refuse to bow down. The Houthis, shaken by the assassination of their prime minister, could have chosen silence. But instead, they chose to rise. They chose to vow revenge, to turn tragedy into defiance, and to send a message to the world that their spirit cannot be extinguished. This is not just about Yemen, nor just about Israel. It is about how one moment can ignite a fire that stretches across seas, challenges powers, and forces the world to pay attention. Stay with me, because as we unfold this story, you will see how one act of violence has set in motion a storm that could reshape the balance of the Middle East, and perhaps even the world. This is not just news, it is history in the making, and by the end you will understand why this vow of revenge carries weight far beyond borders. The assassination of the Houthi prime minister stands as a moment that carries both symbolic and practical weight in the ongoing conflict. For movements like the Houthis, leadership is more than a political position. It embodies the collective will, the identity of the struggle, and the rallying point for the masses who believe they are fighting a just cause. When a leader of this stature is killed, it does not simply create a political vacuum, it strikes at the very heart of morale and unity. Yet, paradoxically, such tragedies often ignite the fire of resistance rather than extinguish it. For the Houthis, the death of their prime minister has become more than a loss. It has transformed into a banner under which they can mobilize greater solidarity and portray themselves as victims of external aggression. In narratives of war and resistance, martyrdom is often elevated as a source of strength, and this event provides the Houthis with a narrative to fortify their resolve and rally support both domestically and regionally. The assassination also highlights the volatility of the region. In conflicts where legitimacy is constantly contested, the targeting of leaders reflects a broader attempt to dismantle organizational structures and cripple momentum. But history shows that in many liberation or resistance movements, the loss of leadership can produce the opposite effect. It deepens anger, hardens attitudes, and inspires a surge of determination among fighters and supporters who see the fallen leader not as a defeat, but as a sacrifice that must be honored through continued struggle. This is exactly the kind of psychological transformation the Houthis are now attempting to project, turning grief into fuel and despair into defiance. Furthermore, the event signals a dangerous new phase as retaliation becomes almost inevitable. In cultures where honor and dignity are paramount, allowing such an act to go unanswered would be seen as weakness. Thus, the vow for revenge is not merely emotional rhetoric. It is an essential component of survival and legitimacy for the Houthis. They must demonstrate to their people and to their adversaries that the assassination does not weaken them, but strengthens their claim to resistance. This makes the death of the prime minister a catalyst rather than a conclusion, setting into motion a chain of escalations that may draw in actors far beyond Yemen's borders. The Houthis now carry both the burden of loss and the responsibility to transform it into an enduring symbol of struggle, ensuring that their prime minister's assassination becomes not a silencing blow, but a rallying cry for continued defiance. The vow of revenge that followed the assassination of the Houthis prime minister is more than just a threat. It is a deliberate declaration of strength designed to inspire resilience among their followers. In the psychology of resistance movements, promises of retaliation serve as a rallying cry that keeps people united in the face of fear, uncertainty, and grief. When leaders fall, the natural instinct of the people is to grieve, but grief alone cannot sustain a cause. It needs to be transformed into resolve, and that transformation comes through the articulation of revenge as both a moral duty and a symbol of defiance. For the Houthis, promising retaliation is not simply about striking back at their enemies. It is about reinforcing the narrative that their fight is righteous, that their sacrifices are not in vain, and that every loss is a stepping stone toward ultimate victory. The symbolism of this vow goes beyond the battlefield. It positions the Houthis as defenders of their community, protectors of dignity, and guardians of sovereignty. By vowing revenge, they communicate to their people that they will not bow down to intimidation or the elimination of leaders. This fosters an atmosphere of unity where each individual feels that they are part of a larger mission. In many ways, the vow itself becomes a psychological shield, one that replaces fear with courage and sorrow with determination. The promise of revenge thus transforms from rhetoric into a vital motivational tool, giving the movement a renewed sense of purpose. For external observers, The vow underscores the resilience of the Houthis as a movement that refuses to accept defeat. Their enemies may view such statements as bluster, but within the movement, these words carry weight and meaning. They ignite passion, encourage loyalty, and create an environment where followers believe they are contributing to a legacy larger than themselves. In societies where struggle has become a way of life, promises of revenge are seen not as reckless words, but as commitments that honor fallen leaders and inspire the living to carry the torch forward. By framing revenge as a symbol of resilience, the Houthis also send a message to their adversaries that no action, however brutal, will crush their spirit. This transforms the battlefield into one of narratives as much as weapons, where each vow becomes a statement of identity. It is this powerful blending of emotion, symbolism, and determination that allows movements to sustain themselves through tragedy, ensuring that the assassination of their prime minister becomes not a breaking point, but a turning point in their struggle. The claim of a ballistic missile attack on an Israeli vessel marks a dramatic escalation in both scale and symbolism for the Houthis. For years, their struggle was largely confined within Yemen's borders, but this event demonstrates a bold shift in strategy by extending the conflict beyond land into international waters. By targeting an Israeli ship, the Houthis have sent a clear message that their resistance is no longer restricted to defending territory, but has evolved into a campaign capable of striking global interests. This act showcases their growing military capability, emphasizing that they are not a small, isolated faction, but an actor willing to challenge powerful adversaries on a larger stage. The very use of a ballistic missile, an advanced weapon compared to conventional arms, carries the weight of defiance, signaling that the Houthis intend to be taken seriously as a force with reach and sophistication. Such a strike carries immense symbolic value. Maritime routes like the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden are critical arteries for international trade, connecting nations and economies. By targeting a vessel associated with Israel, the Houthis draw attention to their ability to disrupt not only regional security but also global commerce. It is a way of proving that their fight is not just against their local enemies but against those they view as part of a broader axis of opposition. This narrative allows them to position themselves as part of a larger cause, tying their struggle to the grievances of others across the region and appealing to sentiments of solidarity against powerful nations. The claim also serves a domestic purpose. For their supporters, it is a demonstration that the vow of revenge is not empty rhetoric but a promise already in motion. It bolsters morale by showing that the Houthis are capable of moving from words to actions, transforming grief over the prime minister's death into tangible retaliation. It reassures their base that sacrifices will be honored not with silence but with bold, visible defiance. At the same time, this attack provokes anxiety among their adversaries. Israel, already cautious of threats on multiple fronts, cannot ignore the implications of such an act. It creates the prospect of broader retaliation and international intervention, escalating tensions in a region already rife with instability. The Houthis claim thus serves a dual purpose, inspiring loyalty among their followers while sowing fear and uncertainty among their enemies. In essence, the ballistic missile strike becomes both a weapon of war and a weapon of narrative, amplifying the Houthis' presence in a conflict that now extends beyond borders and into the global arena. The regional ripple effect of the Houthis' retaliation is perhaps even more significant than the act itself, because in the Middle East, no action occurs in isolation. When the Houthis claimed responsibility for targeting an Israeli vessel, they did not just strike at one adversary, they sent shockwaves across the entire region. The Middle East is a tightly woven web of alliances, rivalries, and fragile balances of power, where the move of one actor immediately affects the calculations of many others. The Houthis, though originating as a Yemeni faction, have now positioned themselves as part of a larger regional equation, where their actions can trigger responses not just from Israel but from allies and adversaries alike. Every declaration of revenge and every attack they carry out reverberates beyond their borders, raising the risk of broader conflict. For Israel, such an attack cannot be ignored, as it represents a threat not only to its vessels but to its influence over key trade routes. A strike on an Israeli ship also indirectly challenges the security guarantees provided by Israel's allies, particularly the United States, which sees freedom of navigation as a cornerstone of its global strategy. This creates pressure on major powers to intervene, increasing the chances of military escalation or retaliatory campaigns that pull the Houthis into direct confrontation with stronger forces. What was once seen as a local insurgency now carries the potential to entangle global powers in another layer of Middle Eastern conflict. For regional players such as Saudi Arabia and Iran, the incident is equally consequential. Saudi Arabia, long a rival of the Houthis, sees such bold actions as both a threat and a complication, especially at a time when it is trying to maintain a delicate balance of security and diplomacy. Iran, on the other hand, may view the Houthis strike as an extension of its own strategy of resistance against Israel and Western influence, even if indirectly. This creates the possibility of further polarization in the region, where alliances are hardened and the lines between proxy wars and direct wars blur. The ripple effect also impacts neutral or neighboring states that rely heavily on trade routes through the Red Sea and Arabian Sea. Countries dependent on maritime commerce fear the disruption of vital shipping lanes, which would not only hurt economies but also increase tensions in global markets. Thus, a single missile strike transforms into a regional destabilizer, shaking confidence in security and raising the possibility that what begins as revenge for a single assassination could spiral into a chain reaction of escalating conflicts. By striking an Israeli vessel, the Houthis intended to send a powerful message of defiance not just to their immediate adversary but to the world at large. In the modern era, warfare is not only about physical battles but about controlling narratives, shaping perceptions, and proving relevance in a global system that often dismisses smaller actors. For the Houthis, claiming such an attack is a way of demonstrating that they are not a marginal force confined to the mountains of Yemen, but a movement capable of extending its influence across borders and seas. The symbolism of targeting an Israeli ship cannot be understated, as Israel represents both a regional adversary and a global power backed by Western allies. In this way, the Houthis are not merely fighting for revenge, they are deliberately positioning themselves as a force of resistance against what they frame as global dominance and oppression. This message of defiance resonates strongly with their supporters, who see the act as proof that their movement has the strength and audacity to challenge stronger enemies. It gives ordinary followers a sense of pride, reinforcing the belief that their struggle is noble and that their sacrifices contribute to something much larger than local disputes. By publicizing their ability to strike an international target, the Houthis also strengthen their image as defenders of dignity, willing to stand up against powers far greater than themselves. For many, this transforms them from a Yemeni insurgent group into a symbol of wider resistance, capable of inspiring similar sentiments across the region. Beyond symbolism, the attack carries practical implications for international perception. It warns that the Houthis can pose a threat to global shipping routes, which are lifelines of international trade. This elevates their status from a regional player to an actor with the ability to disrupt global systems. By doing so, they force larger powers to acknowledge their presence and reconsider strategies for dealing with them. In conflicts where recognition and legitimacy are as valuable as territory, such acts of defiance give the Houthis bargaining power, showing that they cannot be ignored. At the same time, the message of defiance creates unease for global powers that rely on stability in maritime regions. It forces them to see the Houthis not as a distant issue, but as a direct challenge to international norms. In this sense, the ballistic missile attack becomes more than just a strike. It becomes a declaration of existence, a signal to the world that the Houthis will not be silenced, and a reminder that even small actors can exert influence on the global stage when they are willing to risk everything for their cause. The future of the conflict in light of the Houthis vow of revenge and their claim of a ballistic missile strike is filled with uncertainty. Yet it is clear that the trajectory points toward greater escalation. The assassination of their prime minister has created both a wound and a rallying cry, and the Houthis have chosen to answer it with boldness rather than silence. Their willingness to expand the fight into international waters is a sign that they are prepared to move the conflict beyond Yemen's borders, which has profound implications for regional and global stability. Such actions suggest that the Red Sea, already one of the world's most critical shipping lanes, may become a new front line, vulnerable to disruption and insecurity. This will likely invite responses not only from Israel but also from other global powers that have a vested interest in safeguarding trade and ensuring the free flow of commerce. As the Houthis intensify their rhetoric and actions, Israel faces the dilemma of responding with enough force to deter further attacks while avoiding an escalation that could spark wider conflict. Any retaliatory strike from Israel could in turn provoke more aggressive moves from the Houthis, trapping both sides in a dangerous cycle of action and counteraction. This spiral increases the chances of the conflict spreading to involve larger actors, as the United States and Western allies may feel compelled to intervene in defense of Israel or to protect international shipping lanes. Meanwhile, Iran's shadow looms large, as its support for the Houthis adds another layer of complexity, raising the risk of proxy confrontations turning into direct clashes. For the Houthis themselves, the future path they have chosen may strengthen their image as defiant resistors, but it also exposes them to greater risks. The more they project power outward, the more they invite devastating retaliation that could harm their resources and their people. Yet, in the logic of resistance movements, such risks are often accepted as necessary sacrifices to keep the narrative of struggle alive. This cycle ensures that the conflict is unlikely to cool in the near term and may instead harden into a prolonged standoff. Ultimately, the combination of grief, anger, and bold escalation means that the assassination has not weakened the Houthis but has propelled them onto a larger stage. The future of this conflict appears destined to be more turbulent, with every move carrying consequences far beyond Yemen, drawing in powers across the Middle East and beyond, and making peace seem like a distant and fragile prospect. In conclusion, the vow of revenge made by the Houthis after the assassination of their prime minister is not just a reaction to loss, it is a declaration of identity, resilience, and defiance. From the promise to honor their fallen leader to the bold claim of a missile strike on an Israeli vessel. Every action they take signals that they intend to project power beyond Yemen and shape the narrative of resistance on a global stage. Their struggle has now crossed borders, entered international waters, and stirred fears of regional escalation, making it clear that this conflict is no longer local, but tied to the wider dynamics of Middle Eastern politics and global trade. The assassination that might have weakened them has instead become the spark for renewed confrontation, reminding both allies and adversaries that they will not be silenced. The road ahead is uncertain, marked by the possibility of greater instability. But what remains certain is that the Houthis are determined to transform tragedy into a symbol of strength and continuity. Good luck to everyone striving to understand these unfolding events. May you remain aware, engaged, and thoughtful in a world where every action carries consequences. Thank you for your time, and may you continue to seek truth and wisdom in times of conflict and uncertainty.